In a game that had no business turning into a defensive clinic, Lexi Hull made sure it did. She didn't light up the scoreboard. She lit up the scouting report. Her play against Chicago wasn't just gritty, it was surgical. Hull anticipated plays 2 passes ahead, navigated screens like a veteran, and baited opponents into making mistakes they didn't even realize they were committing. Drawing charges, fighting for loose balls, getting the right spot a half-second faster than anyone else. That's not just hustle. That's a defensive IQ teams build game plans around. And for the Fever, it might be a double-edged sword. Because if Hull keeps showing this level of mastery, she may become too valuable to afford. Indiana's front office now has to confront the paradox of modern roster construction.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Do you overpay for a specialist who doesn't score, or risk unraveling the one thing that gave your team identity? Hull's impact is hard to quantify, but impossible to ignore. Other teams see it. They see the PJ Tucker comp. They see a culture builder. The offers are coming, and they won't be cheap. If the Fever match, they might sacrifice flexibility at other key positions. If they don't, they lose their defensive anchor. Either way, Lexi Hull's presence and potential departure forces a deeper question. In today's game, are disruptive defenders finally worth their true price? Lexi Hull didn't light up the scoreboard, but that wasn't the story. What actually turned heads was what she did without the ball. One game, a masterclass in chaos. Hull, known more for her gritty energy than flashy highlights, straight up altered the course of the Fever's matchup with her defense alone. There was no viral step-back 3 or career-high in points. Instead, it was a charge taken at full speed, a dive into the passing lane, and a relentless refusal to let her assignment breathe. She locked onto Marina Mabry and didn't let go. Every screen, she fought through. Every fake, she read it. Hull's defensive instincts turned elite scorers into frustrated passengers. And it wasn't just about stopping one player. She dismantled offensive sets before they could even start. That kind of presence doesn't show up on traditional stat sheets, but it changes everything on the court. Still, it's the offense that keeps her in question. Hull's shooting has been inconsistent at best, which is what makes her upcoming restricted free agency so complicated. She's not a volume scorer. She's not the player who's going to give you 20 a night. But what she does give you is 40 minutes of disruption, leadership, and pure hustle that translates directly into wins. And while she's not there yet as a shot creator, the flashes are starting to appear. A more confident pull-up, a decisive drive, a cleaner release under pressure. It's clear that if Hull can even just develop a dependable shot, nothing fancy, just something to keep defenders honest, she instantly doubles her value. And teams around the league are watching that potential unfold in real time. Her performance against the Aces wasn't an outlier. It was just the loudest confirmation of what's been building. In that game, Hull made every possession feel like a battle. It didn't matter who she was guarding. She brought the same intensity to every matchup. The Aces couldn't find rhythm, and a big part of that was Hull refusing to give them any space to operate. That energy spread. You could see the Fever feed off it. Every drawn charge was a momentum shift. Every scramble, she forced put the Aces on their heels. And when players on your own team start moving differently because of your presence, that's not just defense. You can freeze frame any moment from that game and see it. Hull's body language screams focus. Knees bent, eyes locked, arms always active. She plays like someone who's studied every possible cut, every passing lane, and every shooter's habits. It's not just reaction, it's preparation. Her timing is elite. That ability to rotate on help defense at exactly the right moment, that's not luck. That's film study and instincts working together. It's no surprise that coaches love her. And for all the highlight-hungry talk surrounding other names, it's the glue players like Hull that keep teams from falling apart when games get messy. It's easy to focus on stars like Caitlin Clark when talking about the Fever. Clark's offensive talent is undeniable, and her presence has shifted the spotlight onto the franchise in a major way. But what gets overlooked is how important it is to have complementary pieces like Hull, who make those stars better by taking pressure off them defensively. With Hull locking up perimeter threats, Clark doesn't have to overextend herself on that end. That matters. It allows the Fever to balance the floor better and protect their star player from being dragged into exhausting mismatches. Hull doesn't just play defense. She plays defense with purpose. And that purpose often revolves around protecting the team's most valuable assets. When asked about teammates who bring the intangibles, Clark hasn't hesitated to name Hull as one of the most valuable voices on the court. It's not just that she communicates well, it's that she holds people accountable. There's a trust there, one that goes beyond practice and into live-game situations where split-second decisions matter. Clark is a generational offensive talent, but even she knows that without players who bring toughness and court awareness, all that scoring can be wasted. Hull fills in the gaps. She sets the tone without needing the ball, and that's what gives stars like Clark the freedom to do what they do best. But here's where things get dicey. Hull is a restricted free agent, and that puts the Fever in a brutal position. Other teams are watching what she's doing and recognizing that she might be worth more than what Indiana originally planned. If a team throws a near-max offer sheet her way, what do the Fever do? Letting her walk would absolutely impact the team's defensive identity. But matching a big contract could tie up money that the front office was hoping to spend elsewhere, possibly on a power forward or another shooter to stretch the floor for Clark. The thought of losing Hull and the ripple effects it could cause is already raising concern inside the organization. And for Clark, losing her best defensive partner would sting. The bigger picture here is how the league is valuing role players. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has spoken about the growth of the game and the rising visibility of talent across all positions, not just the stars. Hull represents a test case. She's not the face of the league, but she might be one of its most important supporting characters. As teams rethink how they build rosters, players like Hull suddenly matter a whole lot more. Defensive disruptors used to be a luxury. Now, they're a necessity, especially in a league leaning heavily into high-paced, offense-first basketball. When everyone's scoring, the player who can stop the bleeding stands out more than ever. Speaks. Engelbert's vision for competitive balance and team development hinges on players who execute within their role and bring something unique to the table. Hull is the kind of player who forces coaches to rethink matchups. You can't hide a weak scorer when she's on the floor. You can't coast through possessions, and that accountability trickles down. It also raises the stakes for GMs. Overpaying for a role player has always been considered a risk. But what if that role player is the reason your star player gets to shine? What if they're the difference between making a deep playoff run and getting bounced in the first round? Suddenly, the math gets... Hull's future might not just define her own career. It might define the next chapter of the Indiana Fever. If they invest in her now, they're signaling a commitment to a culture built on toughness and trust. If they let her walk, they're gambling on finding that same impact elsewhere, which isn't guaranteed. This is bigger than one contract. It's about how the league values things you can't always measure. Charges taken, rotations made, energy sustained. Hull brings all of it, and the team that understands that first. That's the team that wins more than just games. If you're here for this kind of chaos, the smart, scrappy kind, drop a comment, hit that like button, and subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next with Lexi Hull and the defensive arms race she just started. There's a reason players like Hull keep finding themselves on winning plays. Against the Aces, she wasn't just reacting to the ball. She was 3 steps ahead, disrupting a dribble handoff here, jumping a passing lane there. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical. Coaches dream about players like that, ones who don't need a clipboard to know what's coming. Hull reads the floor like a scout, then plays like a bruiser. And when you stack her tape against some of the league's most polished scorers, it becomes clear how unique her value is. She doesn't have to win with strength or speed alone. It's timing, angles, discipline. She gets low on defense, holds her ground, takes hits, and forces turnovers not with brute force, but with precision. Its defense is a science, not just an effort stat. The irony is that this whole contract dilemma hinges on the one area Hull hasn't fully figured out: scoring. Teams love her defense. They love her energy. They love her culture setting. But they still pause when her shooting splits come up. Her offense isn't broken, but it's not reliable either. And in a league that worships spacing, that hesitation can cost you millions. But she's not just standing still. There's been growth. Her shot mechanics are cleaner. The hesitation on corner threes has started to fade. Her ability to pump fake and attack a closeout has improved. No one's calling her a threat yet, but the progress is there. And if she ever puts it together, her value skyrockets. And then there's the Clark factor. As the Fever build around Caitlin Clark, they need defenders who can protect her on the other end. That's not a knock on Clark, it's just reality. Every elite scorer in the league has someone who does the dirty work behind them. For Steph Curry, it was Draymond. For Clark, that might be Hull. They balance each other out. Hull brings the defensive intensity and structure. Clark brings the offensive fireworks. Together, they create space, not just on the floor, but in the game plan. When Hull is on the court, Clark doesn't have to guard the other team's best guard. That's not just a comfort, it's a strategy. The craziest part? Hull might be the most important player on this roster who doesn't get marketing love. She's not the jersey seller. She's not getting signature shoe deals. But she's the one diving into the front row, bodying up superstars, and dragging her team back into games with grit alone. And those aren't empty hustle plays. They're calculated. Every time Hull takes a charge, she swings momentum. Every time she forces a turnover, she resets tempo. Her impact is measurable, just not in the ways traditional box scores care about. But coaches see it. Teammates feel it. And now front offices are trying to put a number on it. Zoom into any sequence from her last few games, and you'll find the same traits. Feet chopping fast. Hands active. Eyes darting. Always hunting the next move before it happens. She's not coasting between plays. She's working. If someone gets beat, she's already rotating. If a pass is too slow, she's already closing out. Hull makes the floor smaller for offenses, and that suffocating pressure wears teams down. What's more, her energy isn't reckless. It's contained. She doesn't bite on fakes or overhelp. Her defense is tight, clean, and disruptive. And in a league where fouls can flip games, her discipline is part of her value. She's chaotic for opponents, not for her own team. And it's not just the coaching staff noticing it. Caitlin Clark, in multiple interviews, has praised Hull for the unseen work she does, calling her one of the most reliable defenders she's played with. That kind of endorsement matters, because it means Clark wants her there. And if the face of the franchise is vocal about someone's impact, the front office has to listen. Clark knows that stars don't win games alone. Hull takes on the assignments no one wants, and that allows Clark to conserve energy for offense. It's a symbiotic relationship, and in tight playoff series, that trust becomes the margin between a deep run and an early exit. But here's the bigger conversation. What is the WNBA becoming? Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has pushed for visibility, expansion, and deeper competition. And players like Hull are quietly reshaping what success looks like. We're entering an era where being a scorer isn't enough. If you can't defend, rotate, and communicate, you're a liability. That shift in philosophy means players like Hull are no longer just energy off the bench. They're defensive anchors, strategy setters, playoff necessities. And if the market catches up to that reality, then Indiana is going to have to pay up or risk losing the backbone of its identity. It has been clear. The league is leveling up. That means more talent, more competition, and more pressure on teams to build smart. Hull represents the kind of role player that wins in modern basketball. Not flashy, not high usage, but precise, unshakable, necessary. And that's where the Fever's front office hits its crossroads. Because Hull isn't just a nice-to-have. She's part of the reason they've been competitive. Letting her go to save cap space might save short-term money, but cost them long-term cohesion. And in a growing league, cohesion is currency. Clark's body language says it all. After tough losses, it's Hull who's checking in, clapping for teammates, yelling assignments. She's not sulking. She's not pointing fingers. She's doing the stuff that doesn't go viral but keeps teams from collapsing. Losing her wouldn't just hurt the defense. It'd hit the team's culture. And Clark knows it. That's why the idea of Hull walking in free agency stings. Because she's more than her stat line. She's the first to dive, the last to give up, and the one who never needs the ball to make a difference. The idea of trying to replace that with cheaper depth is how teams go from promising to rebuilding. So where does that leave us? The clock is ticking. Hull's contract situation is looming, and the offers are coming. Some front office out there sees her as their PJ Tucker, their Marcus Smart, their secret weapon. They'll make a bet. The only question is whether Indiana will match it or fold. And if Hull continues to sharpen her offensive tools, that bet might turn into a steal. Because a version of Lexi Hull, who can hit 35% from three while anchoring a defense, that's not a role player. That's a foundational piece. One that wins playoff games and tilts matchups. One that sets the tone not just for a season, but for a franchise. Freeze any frame of Lexi Hull in a game, and you'll see a player who's constantly anticipating. She doesn't take breaks on defense. She doesn't jog through screens or casually close out. Every frame is tension, shoulders squared, eyes reading the floor, knees flexed like she's ready to spring. It's not just hustle. It's technical defense executed at game speed. And it's contagious. Teammates see her effort and rise to meet it. It raises the floor of the entire unit. Coaches talk about tone setters all the time, and Hull is exactly that. Not with words or hype reels, but with sequences of perfectly timed help defense and rotations that make scorers question their next move. She forces teams into bad decisions, then punishes them for it. And all of this puts Indiana in a brutal situation. Because it's not just what Hull is doing now, it's what happens if she gets even better. If they don't re-sign her and she walks, that development happens somewhere else. And the Fever would be forced to watch her thrive in a New Jersey, knowing they had her first and couldn't keep her. There's also no one in the current rotation who replicates what Hull brings. No plug-and-play option. No obvious draftee who's ready to step in and take those responsibilities. And developing a defender of Hull's caliber takes years. Not games. Years. Years of trial, mistakes, studying film, building trust, and understanding spacing. You don't replace that with minimum contracts and optimism. The league has been shifting for a while. Kathy Engelbert's leadership has placed a spotlight on team-building philosophies. Franchises are being pushed to think deeper, beyond talent, beyond brand names. What's your system? Who fits your system? Who reinforces your identity when things go sideways? Hull fits that kind of future-forward thinking. She's not just a defender. She's a system enforcer. The Fever can build a defense-first identity around her, something sustainable that supports young talent and balances a star-heavy offense. But only if they commit. Letting her go is more than a personnel decision. It's a philosophical one. Clark knows that better than anyone. In post-game interviews, she's already pointed out how Hull keeps things steady. She calls out screens. She redirects traffic. She resets when the team gets sped up. And she never takes possessions off. That's not easy to find. Clark's playmaking thrives when her teammates understand spacing, angles, and timing. And Hull checks all those boxes. Clark isn't asking for a roster full of scorers. She's asking for teammates who execute. Hull isn't flashy, but she's effective. And when your top player publicly appreciates someone's impact, it sends a message to the front office. This player matters. This player helps me succeed. The hype around Clark's arrival in Indiana was massive, and rightfully so. Her jersey sales are off the charts. The spotlight is bright. But with all that attention comes the pressure to perform. And that's where Hull becomes even more important, because not every game is going to be smooth. Not every night is a scoring clinic. Clark will have off games. That's where the team needs stability. Hull brings that. She doesn't get rattled. She doesn't let opponents go on easy runs. She's the one clapping after missed shots, anchoring the next possession, and reminding everyone that grit wins games too. And in the long grind of a WNBA season, that stability around a star player could be the difference between surviving and contending. Now think about what happens if Hull's gone. Clark's defensive burden increases. Matchups get harder. Offensive possessions become more draining because there's less help on the other end. And maybe, just maybe, the team loses a few of those close games they've been winning thanks to a single defensive stand or a timely rotation. That's the domino effect. You don't just lose a player, you lose momentum, chemistry, trust. Hull isn't a stat sheet leader, but her absence would echo across every category, from transition defense to effort plays to the overall pace of the game. Clark would feel that loss immediately, and fans would see it in the results. Against teams like the Aces, that kind of presence becomes invaluable. You're up against champions, multiple scoring threats, elite ball movement. If you don't have defenders who understand how to navigate switches, communicate through screens, and close out on shooters, you get buried. Hull didn't just survive that matchup, she thrived. She absorbed contact, recovered, and reset plays that should have been easy points for the opposition. That's not just heart. That's technical mastery. The kind of in-the-trenches performance that wins games against teams most expect you to lose to. Letting that walk. It's not just a mistake, it's a setback. There's also a case to be made that Hull hasn't even reached her ceiling yet. Her shooting form has improved. Her confidence is different. They're the version of Lexi Hull that hits her corner threes at a league-average rate and attacks closeouts without hesitation. That player is no longer just a defensive stopper. That player becomes a two-way problem. And when that happens, you're not talking about someone who fills a gap. You're talking about a matchup nightmare. Coaches wouldn't be able to sag off her. Game plans would have to account for her both ways. And that would free up even more space for teammates like Clark to operate. Hull's development is slow, but deliberate. She's not waiting for the perfect moment. She's building toward it. The whole situation is forcing Indiana into a corner. Match the offer, and you're committing to a vision where defense matters just as much as buckets. Let her go, and you're betting that someone else can do what she does for less. But history shows that defenders with her discipline and consistency are rare. And losing one in the middle of building your core? That's a momentum killer. The franchise is on the cusp of something. Clark is a generational talent. The roster has young pieces. The fan base is re-energized. But all of that only works if the foundation is solid. Hull is part of that foundation, and messing with it during a pivotal stretch could unravel more than people expect. At the end of the day, this comes down to how much teams value winning plays. Kathy Engelbert has made it clear that the league is evolving. Faster pace, bigger stars, more eyes. But behind every viral highlight is a player like Hull, taking charges, boxing out, setting screens, and resetting possessions. And in this new era of positionless basketball, she's the blueprint for a different kind of impact. She won't trend. She won't dominate headlines. But she might be the reason a team survives a fourth-quarter run. She might be the reason a defensive switch works. She might be the reason the Fever finally return to relevance and stay there. If you're all about smart basketball, the rise of defensive monsters like Lexi Hull, and seeing how role players rewrite the game, tap the like button, hit subscribe, and drop your take in the comments. You already know the next chapter is going to get messy.